So, hallo ihr Lieben, schön euch zu treffen. It's really nice to see you, and I have to remember that this is an English class with German speaking participation. And yeah, who knows in which languages anybody comes here in order to just join in the light, right? In order to just be aware that it doesn't really matter what expressions, what ideas we have in our mind. We are here to join in the light of creation, to join in the light of heaven. And this is really the full and entire welcome that we give to each other. And of course, our response is fully given with full gratitude. So 3 days to awakening, right? 3 nanoseconds to awakening now, and that exactly in the ideas as they have been given us in the human condition. And that is, I want to have a little bit more emphasis today now, since we have already emphasized and looked into what is meant with those 3 actions, those 3 steps, those 3 days to awakening. And I want to go more into details now, returning back into day 1. So we said that the day 1 is really this idea of coming into time-space, this entering into a dream sequence called human life, human separated consciousness, experiencing separation, experiencing very personally pain, suffering, and that of this idea or this concept of separation from our source, from the true source God. And yeah, realizing that everything that is followed up here in time space, in the human consciousness, leads to death. Everything is directed to death, everything leads to death, and death as an idea of self-annihilation, that there would be a possibility to cancel out, to annihilate myself, which is of course completely impossible, since I am as God created me. I am His perfection, I am His wholeness. I am not this little limited self that I believe to be, or that had really its focus set in this identity of being a body, and only living by self-observation what one does as a body. And then of course also looking at everybody else and the entire world, what they are doing as a body. So we are in this day 1 coming here and becoming aware of what place that is in the separation, in that identification of the concept of the self, how Jesus calls it in chapter 31. We are still teaching here A Course in Miracles, and that means we have been given learning, healing aids, and that in prayers, that in every word of this book, that in every lesson. And though right now, since already be active in the lesson of the day, since beginning of the year, and we are smack in the middle of the holiness lessons, and they lead over into those lessons 40, 41 to 50, in which we learn or change our perspective towards what God is and all what we are supposed to recognize about ourselves in that communication and experience with God and as God created us. Because there isn't really, of course, any separation. There isn't a God outside myself. And so coming from starting with lesson 35 and going to lesson 50, I'm sustained by the love of God. And then we have 10 days of review of the first 50 lessons, each day 5 lessons. We actually have undergone 34 lessons of very intense mind training program in which we were directed to admit and to look at from where we have come in this arriving here and starting to understand and to realize what that condition of separation truly is. And so that is not a little thing, but that is the basis that we even come then to make a clear decision and use that power of decision in order to say to ourselves, enough of this, I'm choosing the alternative. I'm choosing heaven instead of this hell of separation. I'm choosing a completely different way of looking at everything. I'm choosing to see. And by seeing things differently, I learn to see with the vision of Christ, to see what we can only see with our inner eye, with the heart. And the inner eye, the heart, that is, of course, also the expression of what pure mind is. And that comes through thinking and experience ourselves in innocence and in guiltlessness and in fearlessness and, of course, in defenselessness. So, in order to come to that fearlessness and guiltlessness and sinlessness, we must have a very good look what that condition of separation really is, how the mind operates, not really through analysis and trying to just conceptually understand it, but just by, let's say, looking back from where we are coming so that we can develop and evolve a new vigilance, a new consciousness. See, everything that I'm aware of from the past, that I am not that, or this is not what, how should I say, what represents the truth, will help me to immediately discard it and immediately choose the alternative to think and live with the Holy Spirit. And so to be in that experience, what the Father, the Holy Spirit, what that extension of God, or God's arm, we could say, or the finger of God, how it is painted by Michelangelo, what that really is as a singular experience of awakened mind. And so the first day, as valuable as the second day, will then automatically, as we said, open up to a revelatory awakening in our mind that lets us simply recognize who we always have been, always will be, and who we are right now in truth. And of course, there cannot be anything there that interferes and comes or holds dear and still gives value in a body identity or in any perceptual value of how the world is perceived and seen. But it has all that part has to be transformed, has to be let go, has to be replaced by a higher thought, let's say. So I'm having this, as you all know, coming from this publication of uh, of 3 days to awakening, but also, of course, the call to the unlimited. And here is this book that is published on Amazon. And I'm not really going into that book, but use ideas of a manuscript that will be published in due time. And so on that first day, I will look with you, or go back and look with you, to different ideas. For example, how that looking for a way out of here finally arrives at the conclusion or at the recognition, oh my God, there is no world, right? But without my looking for a way out of here and allowing the transformation to take place, I will not arrive at there is no world. It will simply, the world will be very solid, will feel very real, will feel very heavy, and will also be experienced like a grip of the ego's thought system. And I think I did that before, trying to determine, look, you are a prisoner and you have imprisoned yourself by your own thoughts, and there is no way out for you. That is the ego's doctrine to the human attempt to find a solution. And of course, first to find it in one's own concepts coming from the past or how it was experienced in the past. We already know, using that communication with him and letting ourselves be guided and being undone with all the fear thoughts, all the separation idea. Of course, we know perfectly well that there is no solution within our concept of the self, within a limited way of thinking or a limited way of experiencing ourselves. The solution must come from the mind of God, must be an extension of the truth of God's mind through the Holy Spirit into our holy mind, the holiness of our own self. And only in that connection, in that communication, we are capable of, let's say, giving as we have received. Because what we have been given, what we are receiving now, is nothing less than the entire truth, and the truth and only the truth. And so it is the waking call for peace that that we are, how should I say, by acknowledging what's going on in the state of separation, the waking call for peace becomes an object on which we focus. The mind decides then, okay, where is that waking call for peace? I'm ready. I'm ready to listen now. And so, of course, that waking call for peace will actually, and so Jesus expresses that, this Course in Miracles, this course will lead you directly into fear. That means the waking call will direct your consciousness, your mind, to first have a review how you experience yourself, what your reality is in separation. And of course, that is nothing different than what fear is. It is the consciousness of fear, of being tied down in its limitations, in its own meanings, of having given everything a certain particular meaning and holding it in that meaning and not allowing that it could change it, or it could get lost, or it could get replaced, or we could be shown, oh my God, maybe I am wrong. And maybe I'm entirely wrong. And maybe I'm wrong since the beginning. That's like the expression when Jesus says, your father, your father, your physical father, or your father representing your human concept of separation is false since the beginning. He's a liar, has shared with you lies since the beginning of time. And now, in order to stay in that same trap, we are turning to a waking call, and that is a waking call for peace. And so, of course, that involves a decision, which is at the end of this first day and part of the second day, like a real content, But we do start out in looking at what this fear-prone consciousness or self-concept, what havoc that has caused in us, and that we are really coming from believing in what we have under quotes, created, what we have made up in our mind. And then, of course, the miracle in that coming to an acknowledgement that there is another way of looking at everyone and everything is really an action from searching truth, experiencing the miracle through searching the truth, and to a true relaxation and coming to enjoy ourselves in that experience, in that transformative experience on the way home, let's say, or in the allowance of being completely undone with all fear thoughts. And there will be no other way, but this is maybe already more part of the bridge towards this second day, the questioning all our perceptions. And that questioning, of course, is very important at the beginning once it is realized and recognized that fear has not, or there is no solution within the state of fear, or within that what we were holding dear and real as fear. In other words, still believing that fear and love wouldn't be so different, or would be actually one and the same. And so as long as it is believed that love is still on its basis of fear, we are not really there in the recognition what true love is. And the other way around also, if the fear is just acknowledged as, okay, that's my reality and everybody is fearful, and look at the animal kingdom, and like all beings in this world are fearful, but nobody questions why that is so, because nobody wants to really acknowledge that what he sees in its dream is really just a reflection of one's own state of mind. That means if there's fear in my mind, I will see fear outside in the world. And so, yeah, that reversal of perception through an undoing process of particularly the undoing of all fear thoughts is really the first part and the essential part in day one, action one, at the beginning of our awakening, or let's say, and it is all not really right, it is like once we become aware of that and vigilant of that, that there is fear in the human mind, in the separated state of mind, and we determine to no longer have use of that, or to want to have that converted into love, into a gift of God, into something that has no limitations anymore, that allows us to extend the light of our heart and mind, then that's really, it's like warp drive, that's an immense acceleration. But looking at from where we have come and how this I sense has been defended was solely through fear thoughts, and also, of course, how we have experienced ourselves in fear and through fear. And of course, if I go back and remember just for myself on the storyline, I'm very much aware and have a remembrance about that I was afraid to meet my fears. I was literally afraid of fear. So double distance, you could say. And so, of course, all forms of upset, if it is an expression of anger or of any type of upset and anxiety. So I was afraid to meet that and to experience myself truly and fully in that. So this was my personal dream, as probably you can remember your own dream too, or still in those sequences, and acknowledge that you do need that help, and that might be the reason that you also join here with this teaching and become yourself a teacher of your own thought system. So I wanted, instead of really going there and experiencing myself, instead, to justify the personal solutions of separation, and so I prefer to look where there is no solution, which means I was looking into the projections of my mind. I looked within the world. I looked at the world for how, at least for an embetterment, or for how to resolve this problem of fear or fear thoughts. I did not understand that this was an action of defending myself, and by defending myself in this particular way, that I was choosing literally death over life. Right? So we have to see and to acknowledge that life is not in opposition to death, but it is set as a concept in the human mind, as if those would be in opposition. But in truth, it is like death over infinity and over eternity, over acknowledging who I really am. And this is, of course, was just increasing the fear, But behind that, I had to find, and I had to be directed to acknowledge and to realize I was really afraid, not of what I saw and put into the world or as the world, but of true love, of the love of God within myself, And so also that fear that truly my brother had that love for me, and was also holding up for me, holding the light and love for me. Once I'm willing to undergo the transformation and the undoing, it would be shared and given freely. And of course, that is then inevitable in anyone's transformative process and awakening. So if we are looking on that level, what concepts are at the bottom of the mind that need the undoing, because we are talking here about forms of illusions. Of course, you know exactly what illusions are in your mind and need to be undone, and need to be undone for you, right? By the power of the Holy Spirit. And so you could make a list and you can go into particulars, but if you are somehow with me going for an advancement in the teaching learning process, we will simply say it is all we see, right? All the world I see, and how I see in anything limited, separated, or finite, this is all illusionary and needs undoing. So, of course, also what is considered as myself, because that's the concept of the self. That's what I said in the very beginning. It's just reflecting the idea of who I possibly be, but who I'm not really. So that part that is considered as the dream figure or the dream object. In the dream, you are what fear is. You made yourself so small and so limited, and so something of which God doesn't even know of, that the outcome of that experience and that your identification with that something or somebody in the dream, or as part of the dream, or the dreamer of the dream, is what fear is. And that's already a very important and very valuable admission if we can have that. No? So, and of course, to hand over one fear thought about the concept of the self to the Holy Spirit, to Him, there will be a transfer of that undoing to all our fear thoughts. And He will show us, He will show you what the entirety of your accepting that atonement is and will be. So you can look into the mirror and you can identify as what you see in your face and how you see into faces of others. You can go into objective self-observation, and you can review how you were hurting yourself and what you have done with yourself on a physical level, on a mental level, on an emotional level. And all you will find is like this self-identification over millions of years, that you were holding and identifying as a body, looking at a body. The fear thought has taken on a form which is seen and observed as a body, or is understood as a body. And so, of course, also all types of injuries where we attempted to find, to see if there is any eternity or any limitless thought form in it, has just proven no, this was all a dedication to its annihilation, to a death idea, or we could say an inward turned violent attack thought, right? And so sickness is also, as Jesus has in the lesson, it is a defense against the truth. And so as a defense mechanism, it became that projection of that attack thought upon ourselves, right? And so it is also a projection of a hatred within the mind projected upon ourselves. And so when I personally was looking at this and saw all those states of what fear thought have done, what havoc it has been done in my own mind, in my own consciousness, I saw the cruelty that is the basis of that mindset, and the cruelty I subjected myself to. And so, there's this whole list of whatever burned and cut and contused, in works, the fingers, and injuries with sports and arms, legs, all the limbs were involved with some cuts. It's basically this idea that an idea of self-mutilating that body, that representation of that thought system based on fear would open me a door for the solution. So it's today we can laugh about it, or at least smile at it, and be very, very grateful that we understand now that this was a complete trap, and now we know better by this guidance as Jesus is giving it to us in His Course in Miracles. And so in every practice of every lesson, I'm reminded of how lucky I am to have now a fast track, to be on the fast train, and that is a direct access and direct communication with the higher mind, with the holy mind, with whole mind. But going back to what we were just outlining, there is a necessity, of course, also to realize that the attempt within the ego thought system, the attempt that I made when this was still real, or those were my ways how to hopefully open up a solution. But it was literally an attempt to kill. And I want to very consciously use the word of the child within myself, child capitalized. That child, the Christ child, and to kill the child that we experience in pure love, joy, innocence, and defenselessness. That child has proven cannot be killed, no matter what we attempted to do, because that child is within ourselves, is really also that consciousness that connects with the Holy Spirit and becomes literally the Holy Spirit's representation. So any hate of ourselves, if you hate yourself until you realize that in fact you have hated only the projections that you put out into the world. So you could say, okay, I hated the world, but that you invented, right? But you didn't really hate the brother, your brother. It looked like, maybe it looked very much like that we would hate our brother, but we haven't really hated each other. We have hated only the limitation of those projections, of those limited thought forms that we were hitting each other or projecting upon each other. So no matter if that was then considered or declared as an enemy or somebody you really don't like, but in truth you really have misjudged, and that was all. We just have misjudged each other. And so all these forms of attack thoughts, of violence, of vengeance, not to forget, that is really our expression since the beginning of time, since consciousness started to evolve. I always say, since me as the amoeba's appearance in the animal kingdom, the bacterial or protozoic appearance. And those are really just ripples, and they're playing on the surface of the waves of your fearful dreams, and so they're expressed out of the dream's incapability of accepting them for a moment and feeling the underlying fear, which is then also realized as it's really the fear of the love, as we said. But before that, it's also the fear of death, the fear of non-existence, the fear of complete annihilation. And and also to just stand there for a moment in a complete vulnerability. So the fear of not being recognized also, and the fear of not being respected, or the fear of being hurt. The ego's need to get even may especially and quite easily be triggered, and triggers this wave of getting even, this wave of expressions of fear thoughts, of expressions of upset, and of course of personal and direct attack and violence. That all comes simply from fear itself. It's all based on fear. And of course, I did it also, as all humans beings have tried it in one or the other way, and to cover it up, and to deny its existence, to cover up fear, deny its existence in my mind. And but at some point I could no longer deny it, because I was in pain and I was suffering that fear thought of separation. And what I saw and how I experienced it in the world. So I remember very vividly that these were objective, like images in which I experienced the fear of loss, that I lost everything I loved. that's especially in personal relationships. I could experience that very deeply. Every time there was a separation, that I was right there at this immense experience of fear of loss. Yeah, and so I was basically in an experience that death is my companion, my constant companion. Yeah. So gladly, and that will be more. That's more already, but as I said, it's going hand in hand anyway. It's more an action of second day that I couldn't stand it any longer. And that I couldn't stand anymore that everyone around me too is suffering, and everyone around me is still dying or believing in death or is representing death, and grows old, gets sick, suffers from sickness, and also just reflecting to me the endless stories of loss. Of course, this was a simple reflection of my own mind. And so I noticed that also on the level of when I worked, and I was a veterinarian in the world, and so I had always contact with clients who came with their pets, or with large animals. I was visiting them, the farmers, and so slowly and slowly I became aware that everybody is just complaining constantly about their losses, and complaining about their lives, and it was basically describing the insanity of the dream, and what happens to that body identification in its dedication to death. So I was just observing myself in the world, and how I was myself just waiting to die. And that was what was reflecting back to my mind, of course. But slowly and slowly, I started to see that those are really just layers in my own mind, and I could recognize, okay, this is not outside there anymore. This is really going on in my own mind. And so I could inquire into their nature, into its nature, and see that I'm looking literally at something that has no substance, that has no effects, that is empty, that is nothing in itself. But that needed a direct experience also. I needed to touch that directly and very personally within myself. But in the introduction of the Course in Miracles, the sentence is, the opposite of love is fear, right? The opposite of love is fear, but what is all-encompassing can have no opposite. So once we step above and it comes really to an experience of a direct experience where it is being undone and dissolves and disintegrates, there is no opposite. Nothing real can be threatened, right? Nothing unreal exists. Those are the sentences in the introduction of A Course in Miracles that should always be the basis of how we determine what is supposed to be real for us. And so also should help us that nothing else except reality, nothing else has any reality. So yeah, I'm having here also some sentences from chapter 13 in the 5th section of the text. And here Jesus talks about the two emotions, and he says that we have two emotions. You have but two emotions, love and fear. And one is changeless, but continually exchanged being offered by the eternal to the eternal. So what the one that is truly love is changeless, but all that is but still continually exchange being offered by the eternal to the eternal, so brought to its all-encompassing nature, to that level where there's a clear realization that there is no opposite. And the other has many forms, right? Fear has many forms. For the content of individual illusions differs greatly. Yet they have one thing in common. Do you know what he's saying here? They are all insane. That's what all illusions have in common. That's what all fear thoughts and all projections coming from fear have in common. They're all insane. You don't need to analyze it. There's no little attack and a huge attack. It's the same insanity. They are made of sights which are not seen and sounds which are not heard. They make up a private world which cannot be shared. And that's already quite a slap in our face, a private world which cannot be shared. Oh my God, is it that I have reduced myself that much? And that is kind of a good, sane devastation at the beginning of giving a yes for one's transformation. We're talking here about this first action, this first step, this first state to awakening. For they are meaningful only to their maker, right? Meaningful only to the maker. Who is you in your mind? Who is me as the maker, an inventor of all that is experienced in the dream? And so they have no meaning at all. And therefore, none of those illusions, none of those limitations have any meaning. In this world, their maker moves alone, for only he perceives them. And those are at the very beginning, this first paragraph of this fifth section in chapter 13, very important admissions to make, and also to see that these emotions of fear and these experiences of fear are really of our own making. And while believing yourself to be separate from God and having no relationship to the natural radiance of God's love that is in truth inherent within you. This is our inheritance. The love of God has been given us in creation and has not left us. But fear is always known as a lack of love. And so it is, you have to understand it is like love blocked, right? Blocked by your own illusionary willpower, your own made up willpower, that ego, the ego I, as I call it, this ego I sense. And if you're doing that, it all by your own imagined will, separated from God, and that also means separated from your brother, right? Because that is in the experiencing and in the reality, and now we can enlist it, expectations, desires, especially unfulfilled desires, needs, limited self-recognition, like to believe to be a body, to believe to be part of the world is a limited self-recognition. You will always only experience yourself in a condition of being subject to loss, right? And that is not true. That experience of yourself that you would be subject to loss is really what this hell, being in hell, being trapped in your mind, being imprisoned by your own thought forms. That is what we believed, for thousands and thousands of lifetimes. And so we can express really our gratitude for getting such a message like A Course in Miracles, giving us for a moment a mirror image of what this ego I and this belief in it has offered us and has done with us. Now, in order to make here a point with the Course, I'm gonna go here to that introduction at the very end of the workbook. It is actually the introduction for the lesson 331 to 340. So pretty much at the end of the workbook lessons, and is under the question, what is the ego? And here it says, I just give a synopsis of some sentences. The ego is idolatry, the sign of limited and separated self, born in a body, doomed to suffer and to end its life in death. That is what the ego was believed or was held in our mind. The ego is insane, Jesus says. It dreams of punishment and trembles at the figures in its dreams. Another sentence is, to know reality is not to see the ego and its thoughts. So 3 days to awakening, to know your reality. We are learning, we are starting out already on day 1 to not see the ego and its thoughts, its works, its acts, its laws and its beliefs, its dreams, its hopes, its plans for its salvation, and the cost belief in it entails. Because, of course, the cost is death and the idea of death. You will one lily of forgiveness, one lily of forgiveness, one action, one transfer, one giving an illusion to the Holy Spirit, right? And receiving the healing power that comes back and is given us. One lily of forgiveness yet will change the darkness into light, the old to illusions, to the shrine of life itself, of life eternal itself. And so, of course, becoming now clear about what our path is, what way we're gonna go, and being clear about that we are not digging and believing in the ego thought system for the solution, but really acknowledging that this is all insane. We come to, of course, to a new honesty in our minds, in our expression, in our hearts, about expressing ourselves, expressing our feelings, expressing what and how we think about, and having the willingness to experience our feelings and our thoughts entirely into their experiencing them into their originating source, right? We're bringing those still, whatever the thought forms are, into the source of our being, where, of course, they dissolute, they disappear, they are converted literally into love and light. And this is how we realize then who we are. So we're going to leave it with that today, because we have touched here quite some core, profound thought form and thoughts, how we have kept ourselves in limitation, in separation, in fear. And just to really become super conscious and vigilant that we have no use of that anymore, and we are no longer willing to defend a thought system that kept us imprisoned in this limited form. So we are here to demonstrate and to teach ourselves how we have given permission and given commitment to use the Holy Spirit, to receive and absorb the Holy Spirit's wisdom, and of course, how to give that wisdom and that clarity and that truth that we have received through Him. I love you with all my heart. I'm so glad that you're here. It took a little bit longer today, a few minutes more, and we're just going to leave it with that. You have a most wonderful day moment in that remembrance of how you woke up from this dream. Thank you for being with me in that. I love you. Okay, here have some more sounds.